Chapter 29. Arthur Nance looked at the clipboard in his hand. As the main doctor at the hospital where he worked to save people's lives, it was his duty to tell them about their disease and injuries. But he didn't want to talk to Bruce Lucent. Bruce was a big, important software developer and didn't like it when people or things didn't go his way. So Arthur knew his wouldn't be taken well. He wandered to the hospital cafeteria where he got a ham sandwich to eat because he was very hungry. It had been a long day, and he'd had to perform surgery on 2 different people since he had got to the hospital early that morning. One had had a heart attack and needed open-heart surgery, and the other had to have her appendices out. She'd been very pretty, and he had to tell himself not to think about that because he had to concentrate to take out her appendix. He ate his sandwich quickly and then got a Diet Dr. Pepper to drink. It was his favorite, and he got worried sometimes that he was addicted to the sweet, caffeinated drink. Arthur looked at his watch. 7:15 it was, time to check on the people on intensive care, including Bruce Lucent. He just couldn't get away from him. He turned. Which way was his room again? Oh yeah, it was in the south wing. Arthur Nance turned and started marching down the hall towards Bruce's room. He sighed as he marched down the hall towards Bruce's room. On the way, he passed a pretty nurse, Margaret Eastman. He stared at her beautiful curves, then cursed himself silently for staring at her.
Of my virtue I am justly proud.
It just wasn't proper. But it was hard not to stare at her luminously curvaceous body and her soft, curvy cleavage. She was so pretty. That was the problem with this hospital. Too many pretty nurses and patients were here. Maybe he'd ask her out to lunch or something sometime. As he continued marching down the hall, Margaret turned to him. "Hey," she said, "didn't I see you earlier? You were taking care of Bruce Lucent," she queried, looking at his nice, thick muscles. He was pretty hot, she thought. Maybe she would ask him to lunch, but not now.
Not this time.
"He was in the car accident with Henry Archer last week, wasn't he?" she asked him, looking him up and down now. Oh yeah, she was hot, with all those muscles. What a stud. But she wasn't looking for him. She was looking for Lucent. Maybe he could tell her who Irene Stevens was. Henry never really had, but she had seen her name on his address list. Arthur Nance took a drink of his Coke, savoring the cool, sweet drink as it fizzed down his throat. Yeah, he was probably addicted, but he didn't really care. Stress would kill him anyway, or maybe a car crash, because there were a lot of them these days. There have been 2 in the past week, Bruce and Henry's. He would probably take up smoking cigarettes if his boss hadn't yelled at people who smoked and fired them.
Yeah, why? He wondered. Do you want to talk to him?
Yeah, I want to ask him about this girl, Irene Stevenson, or something like that. 'Cause I think he might know her, she stated calmly.
Well, I can't let you see him, but I can ask him for you, he declared. Looking at his watch again, it was 7:30 now. Oh crap, I need to check on a patient.
And he turned and left her standing in the hallway. Arthur entered Lucent's room. He was eating a pork chop, and the doctor winced. He was vegan and didn't like seeing other people eating meat or wearing leather like the leather on Bruce's imported brain case. That was leaning against the bed. "Hi, Nancy!" exclaimed Bruce, who had finished his meal by now. They had gotten to know each other by now. The car crash was almost a month ago. He sat up and grinned at Nance, who didn't like being called Nancy, because it was a girl's name, and he was a very muscular, athletic guy with a lot of sexy muscles. But he didn't want to upset the software developer, because he might get mad at him. Lucent sat up and put the remains of his lamb chop aside. "Yeah, I was just wondering where you were, because I want to talk to you. I think I'm better enough to go home now, don't you?" He pointed to his neck. Wish no longer had to have the foam brace on it anymore. He was glad because it itched like when he was a kid and broke his leg and had a cast. That had itched, and so did the neck brace, so he was glad he didn't have to wear it anymore.
I don't think that would be a good idea, expostulated Nance angrily. You still need a lot of therapy for your leg, and you can't drive again yet.
Then can you tell me, Doctor, what about some people? Questioned Bruce Lucent. Dr. Nance started pacing around the room back and forth, back and forth.
People's lives are covered by the Privacy Act, Mr. Lucent, opined the doctor to his patient. I can't tell you about anyone at the hospital, if that is what you mean.
Well, it was more about the accident that almost killed me. Bruce Lucent sat up straight, a dangerous look on his face. Nance knew Bruce was used to getting his own way for the past few years, sign he got rich. So he sometimes got more violent than sometimes another person might when the same thing was going on. Nance stopped pacing up and down and sat down in the chair next to Bruce's bed. After all, what could the software geek do? His leg was still in traction. Or at least had been until yesterday, and he could probably not move very fast yet either. He had good muscles, though. Almost as good as Nance's that he worked out for hours to get and still had, despite being older than Bruce. He ran his hand through his sandy brown hair and blurted,
That's the police's job. I know they came here more than one time to talk to you about the accident. They don't tell us doctors about that stuff, and we don't need to know.
Bruce thought about the young cop who had questioned him. He had been asking questions, not telling him anything. If he knew more about the accident, he hadn't told Bruce. But he bet this doctor knew more than he was telling. He could tell by looking at his face. It was a face that kept secrets. Hundreds of secrets. Every day, he bets. You know, I can make a big donation to this hospital if you can get me the information I want. Bruce spurted out. You know me well enough. By knowing to know that I am the sort of person who wants to ask questions, not answer them. So, maybe I can make you think. Here are some names, and not from your hospital either. I need to know who wanted Henry Archer dead. What does Irene Stevens know about his? No, I was wrong. There is one person at the hospital. A nurse named Margaret.
He must think I'm like a candy striper who sits and tells everything she knows, thought Nance to himself. Maybe I do know something I won't tell about Henry Archer. A candy striper named Nancy, he must think. And does he mean Margaret Eastman for the nurse in this hospital? And how soon will that big donation come, once he's not in the hospital anymore? He'll forget it fast enough, and my hypocritical oath will be down the toilet.
Bruce watched Arthur Nance's trim, mustache face and thought that Nancy boy wouldn't tell him anything. He was it closed down and saw the secrets hiding there. Too bad he had spent all his time working out or studying computers. He didn't spend enough time with people, so he didn't know body language, and Arthur Nance probably spoke it like a native. So he could sit there with his shoulders all hunched up and his face closed over his secrets. And it's so oblivious that he knows what I mean and could tell me what I want to know. All right, then since you don't want to tell me what you know, even if you do know, how about just make me more comfortable here, since you won't let me go home either? You could start with that pretty nurse. She was standing outside my door talking to one of my friends that came to visit me. She looks like her uniform is painted on with medium-length brown hair. That's the nurse I want, not the one who looks like she had prunes for breakfast and is older than my grandma. Bruce sat up straight in his hospital bed and ran his hand through his long black hair, thinking that he needed a haircut really bad.
I'm sorry, sir, but the hospital does not assign its personnel like that, spat Arthur Nance. If Nurse Eastman is who you mean, she isn't one of the floor nurses on this floor, so I can't assign her here anyways.
Then move me to her floor. I would get much better faster with her being the one to give me shots in the butt. Bruce! Lucent expostulated.
She works in maternity. That should show him for trying to throw his weight around, thought Arthur Nance to himself. And the way he's acting, I won't tell him what I know, even if I was going to, which I was, but now I won't.
So, maybe I could get pregnant? Queried Bruce Lucent, hysterical.
When Nurse Wagner tells you to do your therapy, that will get you out faster than joking with me,
quipped Arthur Nance. Suddenly he thought to himself that Bruce Lucent asked him about Irene Stevens, and so had Margaret Eastwood. And Bruce Lucent also asked him about a nurse whose name was Margaret. So what did Margaret Eastman now? This just made it even surer that he would not tell Bruce Lucent anything. He could not have this sort of thing going on in his hospital. Arthur Nance ran his hand through his sandy brown hair and stood up.
I'm sure you'll be able to go home in a few days if you do what you're supposed to do that the nurses tell you.
So, what was it you came in here to tell me anyway, Doctor? Queried Bruce to the doctor?
Oh, nothing. I was just checking to see how your leg was out of its cast, and if you still needed the neck brace. You better use that neck brace when you use your computer you have there.
Arthur Nance pointed to the laptop computer case next to the bed, in its leather case that got all scuffed up in the car wreck.
If you hurt your spine worse, you'll never be able to program again.
Bruce Lucent was tired of Dr. Nancy telling him what he could do and couldn't do. Why did he come here to stick his nose in if not to talk or answer questions? Did he hope Bruce would tell him something? Not likely. This hospital was a hotbed of all sorts of things going on. He hadn't been here for nearly 2 months without figuring that out. But now he knew that Dr. Arthur Nance was an enemy, not a friend, and he would look out from now on. A nurse, not prune-faced Wagner, but cute with short curly blonde hair and a really nice ass, brought in Bruce's lunch right then. So Dr. Nance stood up so straight and muscles, even if he was old, fast out of his chair and left the room like walking out of a TV courtroom. Bruce smiled at the nurse. Hey, cutely, I haven't seen you before. Are you Desert? The nurse smiled back and even giggled a little.
Do you come with the car?
Oh, you.
Which Bruce hated girls who giggled, but she was cute anyway. While she was putting the tray over his bed and unloading the pork chops and mashed potatoes and lima beans and milk and jello and chocolate cake, he even patted her butt and she just giggled again.
Do you come with the car?
Oh, you.
He hated lima beans, but he didn't say anything. If he rang the bell and made somebody take them away, maybe it would be her. And then he wouldn't have food all over and could maybe get to know her a little better. Too bad he had this huge cast on his leg. It made it kind of hard. To anything he wanted, but sure didn't stop him from waiting it. Almost as much as he wanted to know what was going on and who had tried and succeeded in killing Henry Archer.
Georgia on my mind.
Big thanks to all these fuckers who send me money on Patreon, particularly Breaksist and BSC. If you want to see your name up here and get all kinds of other cool benefits, take a look at my Patreon setup. There's some cool things there. I'll see you next time on Atlanta Nights.